This is an amazing Science Saturday, and I know, I say this every month, and someday you're gonna be like, Kitty, you say this every month. Is it still amazing? Yes, it is always amazing, but today is spectacularly amazing. We've got, I think, according to our favorite scientist, Joe, a very close up on my face right now, and so it's mystery, but we're moving back. We're finding out we are someplace new. We are in the ocean, and we're not in the ocean connected to a dock. We are in the ocean, anchored in a very special place. So, all this exciting news, we are hosting Science Saturday from inside the St. Thomas East End Reserves. This is the marine protected area on the east end of St. Thomas. Shout out to Steer and Karen, our new Steer coordinator. Whoop whoop. And we're going to be doing something really amazing and festive and science-y and corally today. So I've got some people next to me. You all know Mason, who's got some high-tech gear today, which we're going to explain. And who's this lady? Hey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Marilyn Brandt. I'm the director of the Reef Response Coral Restoration Program at the University of the Virgin Islands, where I'm also a research associate professor in marine and environmental studies.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah,
and spoiler alert, I already knew that, but we know how much fun I like to have. So, what are we doing? Well, do you want to tell us a little bit more detail about where we are today?
Sure. Well, we are within Steer, but almost more importantly, we are sitting at one of our coral nurseries. So we're actually on top of the coral nursery, but we have 5 divers underwater who are tending to our PVC tree coral nursery here off of the islands in Steer.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So this is really cool, and you guys will notice we've got our Santa hats on because in case you didn't read the title of today's event, this is the Festival of Coral Trees. So we are combining the holiday spirit with the conservation and restoration spirit, and the divers are actually going to be working on some coral trees that you have in the water. So what does that mean? We have had Science Saturdays about coral, and we've talked a little bit about restoration, and we have seen the tables at the university. But what is different and special about the trees?
Okay, so the trees, so if you're familiar with coral restoration, you should know the plight of corals then. So they're certainly declining around the world. But our group, Reef Response, works really hard to identify corals that are more resilient to some of the stressors that's causing their declines. And corals, though, they can be kind of fussy when you're trying to make them more resilient to going out onto the reef. So what we do is we have an underwater coral tree nursery where we take these resilient corals and we put them on these PVC trees that you should be able to see in just a little bit. We hang them on the trees like ornaments, and that allows the corals sort of a place that's protected from reef predators, that's protected from other stress. So we put these nurseries in really nice locations. And that lets the corals grow really quickly. And then what we do is we go and we take those little coral ornaments off, and then when they're big enough, and then we put them out onto the reef to try to restore them.
So these coral ornaments never leave the water. We're not taking them home. That's bad.
Unfortunately, you do not take coral home.
It's never.
Not a good idea.
It is a bad idea and against the law.
Yes.
And, Science Saturday is a DPNR event. We are not taking corals out of the water. And our favorite thing to say, all this work is done under permits.
Absolutely, under many permits.
Many permits.
many permits.
Excellent. So, this is really cool, and pretty soon we're gonna move underwater. Not us. We're staying up here warm under our beautiful shade cloth.
Right.
But can you talk a little bit more about just the more general stuff that your team works on?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so
while we do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, some of the corals that you'll see being hung as ornaments on these trees so that they can grow out, they're actually endangered corals. They're the staghorn coral. So they look like little antlers, also going with the holiday theme. So these corals are, they're endangered. They've experienced major declines throughout the Caribbean in the last couple of decades. But with our help, we're trying to bring them back to the shallow reef environment. And what you'll find is these corals, because they're so spiky and staghorny, they create a lot of habitat for fish and other organisms that live on the reef.
Very cool. So in one of our Science Saturdays, I want to say about 2 years ago, Joe talked about the structure of a reef and how different shapes and sizes create a diversity in habitats. And so if you want to check out the YouTube playlist, Science Saturday on YouTube, you can go back and watch that one and to see some example. We actually did that up at the nursery table. Yeah. So
should we go underwater?
Yeah, I think we're getting ready. You guys can see underwater. So so you guys notice that Mason is wearing this fancy headgear today. So he is actually in communication with the divers underwater. So this, two of them, right? We've got six divers underwater, and two of them are wearing full face masks. You guys will remember that when we almost did the seagrass Science Saturday under the dock, we had those full face masks. And we are talking, so he's got the gear. Smush, do you want to let the divers know that they are streaming live?
Okay. You guys are live and we can see the GoPro feed.
All right. Excellent. So
underwater we have Jason and Catherine have the face masks on, and then working on the trees behind them are our other little elves. So Nicholas and Rachel, and Brad and Dan are also helping to kind of maintain the area and take some pictures for ourselves too.
Excellent. Very cool. So this is really exciting, and we can see the stream. So for those of you guys, we've got two streams that you guys are seeing. So for us up here, we've got to look down to the right to see what you're seeing. So
you might see some divers right now hammering on the coral. They are trained to do this, so they know how to do that. Please don't hammer on the coral at home. But what they're doing is trying to cut the coral into small pieces that will grow best on the coral trees. So they're selecting the corals individually to make sure we have the healthiest pieces and that they're going to grow the best. So it's okay if they're chiseling a little bit on there. Yeah.
So we have done a Science Saturday on microfragging, but that isn't quite this, right?
No.
So this is not the in the lab, and so if you guys want to go back, we were at the Nature Conservancy with Lisa, and we were microfragging at their tables. But this is more selecting the best fit for the trees, right?
So I mean, one size does not fit all for corals, for coral restoration. So some corals need to do microfragging, which is where we cut them into very small, very well-defined pieces. And a lot of the mounding corals and the brain corals like that because they need to be babied a little bit more. These staghorn corals, though, they don't want to be put into those tiny pieces. They like to be in kind of the wider fragments.
Okay.
So you'll see them doing that. And then again, you know, the microfrags, when you fragment them, they have to sit in a land-based nursery. These guys, if you put them in a land-based nursery, they get even more fussy. So that's why we keep them in the ocean, because they really need that current flow.
Okay.
So every coral has its own little needs and fussiness. That's why we love them.
Right. Okay. So that's really cool. Kind of reminds
ask them
me.
some questions.
Yeah. So how deep the water is? Do you want to ask them how deep it is?
Okay. We were wondering how deep the water is.
Are we still connected?
Hope so.
Yeah, I think so. All right. So, and just so you guys know, we have a few delays with all the equipment that Joe has set up. We have a delay with the audio and the video.
Can you tell them to repeat that?
Sorry, how much?
12 feet.
Oh, all right.
12 feet. deep.
About 12 feet. Okay.
Which is not very much, but
Right.
that's okay. This is our shallowest coral nursery. We have another coral nursery that's at about 20 feet.
Ooh.
We like to keep the corals shallow so it's easier to maintain them,
Right.
to check on them, so they're getting plenty of light, plenty of current flow. So they're at about 12 feet, but
Okay.
they still need dive gear to deal
Right.
with it.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like it would be fun to free dive up and down.
No, absolutely not. No.
So you said this is the shallowest one. How many other nurseries do you guys have right now?
So right now we have 3 in-water nurseries. So this one near the airport, and then one off of Livongo Key.
Okay.
The one near the airport and the one here are both these PVC tree nurseries that you may be able to see soon. And then the one off of Livongo Key is what's called a table nursery. So it's actually rebar that we've coated with special mixtures and that we've shaped into the letters that spell Livongo.
Ooh.
Which is really cool, too.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
And then we have the land-based nursery, and we're also we have some permits now to install another nursery, but this will be more of a demonstration nursery near the University of the Virgin Islands.
Very
campus.
cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right.
I was just seeing, there's the coral tree.
Oh, we've got the coral
There's
tree.
Dan taking photos.
Oh, nice.
That's our resident photographer, Dan Mealy, taking some pictures.
We can send them over to the trees if you guys want.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're
Yeah.
ready. Smush, why don't you send the divers over to the trees?
Ask them if we can see the trees. Yeah.
Take about 10 seconds.
Okay.
Will you guys go check out the trees and stuff? Yeah.
Solid radio skills.
I'm always nervous on the radio.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of new tech here today,
Yeah.
but we're
It's
going
really
great.
exciting. Yeah.
So
they you may be able to see when you get to the trees. So what they do is we use fishing line to wrap around the corals, and then we crimp it off, and then we basically just dangle them from the PVC trees. But these trees take a lot of work, and so it's not something you can just kind of do on your own.
Right.
They take a lot of cleaning, a lot of maintaining. The corals take a lot of tending too, so we want to make sure that they stay as healthy as they can be. Oh, there you go. You can see the PVC branches.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like a Christmas tree. And they take the little corals. They're fragmenting them now, and they hang them off of the branches with fishing line, and then usually they're out there for about 6 months before they grow and they start to put out new branches.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we usually take them and we identify a place that's appropriate to what we call outplanting, which is basically taking the corals and attaching them to the reef that's going to be their home.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a little bit about how hard this work is. So this is a trained team.
Yes, this is
So,
absolutely a training.
We can have a little bit of bragging time if you want to talk about the training that the team goes through for this.
Yeah. So, although we do have a citizen science program, so we've had volunteer divers help us, but usually that's in very controlled, very simplified situations. So, to be one of our divers, everyone on our team has an educational degree on marine biology, so they understand, the biology and the ecology of corals. But then on top of that, they also have to be a scientific diver, and that takes a lot more work than just being sort of a recreational scuba diver. And anyone who's been scuba certified knows that that's a lot of work too,
Yeah.
right? To just be regular certified. So to reach the level of science diver, you have to have an advanced get to your advanced scuba certification, you have to have rescue certification, and then you have to go through additional training to be able to work underwater. Because as a scuba diver, while these guys are working, you can see they're using tools, they're picking things up and putting them down, they're hanging things. You have to have super good buoyancy. And so buoyancy is being able to stay in one place on the water. And that can be really difficult. So we spend a lot of time training to make our buoyancy really, really excellent, and then be able to handle picking stuff up underwater and putting it down, while also continuing to remember that you have a limited amount of time based on how much air you have.
Yeah, because all of your air is in your tank.
Right,
So
exactly.
you really gotta, be safe.
Right.
Safety first.
Be safe. So, they go through all of those certifications, and then we do additional training on how to handle the corals and how to handle the trees. So there's just a lot of work. It's usually a few years to get to the point of being on this team as a full-time technician.
Right.
So, but we also train students. We always have graduate student and undergraduate interns who do fantastic work with us. And then, we're trying to open up our citizen science program again for folks to be able to come out and help us at least clean the trees, because they get real dirty underwater.
Yeah, absolutely. They're
Yeah, like
Algae
seaweed attaches and barnacles and all kinds of stuff likes to grow on those nice, clean PVC
right.
pipes.
Sargassum snack?
We have had sargassum kind of snag on top of the buoys before, but usually it doesn't last too much, and the sargassum's usually at the very surface, so it's not affecting our trees too much. Yeah.
Nice. Interesting. All right.
Do we have any questions for underwater?
So let's say, talking more about the restoration process, after a coral is on the tree and it's nice and healthy and it's ready to graduate, where do they go?
So we have a really structured way of selecting sites. So we don't want to just go to a reef that has all these stressors that cause the coral reef to decline in the first place. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to find reefs that have had coral decline, but where the conditions have improved, so that we know there's going to be a good hope for the corals that we put down there.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking for places that don't have a ton of seaweed, that aren't going to be exposed to a lot of sargassum, that don't have people ripping apart the land right next door so that the sediments go in. So we're trying to find sites where we know the corals are going to do well, the reef needs help, but it maybe it needs a jump start, in that when we can give it that jump start by putting out a certain number of corals, then the reef can kind of take over for itself. Those corals will continue to grow, they'll start to reproduce after a couple of years, and then they can start to kind of reseed that reef itself.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you're looking at stuff in the water and on the land too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one thing everybody should really keep in mind, is that the ocean is very closely connected to the land. So what we do on land absolutely impacts all of the nearshore coral reefs. So anytime you see like muddy water going down the roads because sediment fences haven't been put up, or trash is flowing over the roads or something like that from the rain, that's going right onto these reefs, and really it can smother the corals. And the corals, again, they're the foundation of the coral reefs. They're the trees and the rainforest of the sea, right?
Yeah.
So if you kill the corals, you remove that habitat for all of the things that we like to see on coral reefs, like the fish and the lobsters and all of the little organisms, the octopus, all those guys. Yeah.
Yeah. So I imagine that if you were a coral and sediment was coming in, it would be kind of like trying to walk through a really smoky room, or like walking through a dust storm.
Yeah.
Not good.
No, not good. I mean, corals, you think about them, they can't get up and walk away.
Right.
So whatever we throw on top of them, that's what they have to deal with. So corals are, they can be really, really big, but really the only part of them that's alive is the very outside part.
Mm-hmm.
So if you damage or smother that outside part, that's it. Then they can't get through with it. So they try really hard to push. They have their tentacles. They try to push the sediment and the dirt off of them, but sometimes it's just too much and they get smothered.
Aww.
Yeah.
All right. So we want to protect the coral so that, projects like this is a lot of effort and grants coming in and time and teams to grow new healthy coral. So we want to make sure that they're going somewhere that they can, have a healthy life, that they're good.
I mean, you can we actually just did an estimate the other day, and for every coral that you're seeing on being put on that tree, over the lifespan of it being with us, so before it gets outplanted, it's about $350 a coral.
Wow.
Is how much it costs for us to do this. So it's much cheaper for everyone if we don't have to do this.
Right, yeah.
We will do it, but it's much cheaper for everyone.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
it's really interesting to think about just
Yeah.
within the time. But then if you think about the economic value of a coral reef,
Oh, yeah.
you know, after it's been outplanted.
Yeah.
This is a Science Saturday we have not done. We haven't talked about. I don't know if I'm qualified to even talk about an economic conversation. But you know, they're really important. They're protecting us from storms. So we learned in the storm surge Science Saturday how corals protect us from storm surge.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
Oh, you can see the little coral, the staghorn fragments now.
Yeah. Nice
Great.
close up.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, let them know.
Maybe tell them they're looking great down there.
Yeah. We like the close-ups.
We
of
like the
coral.
feed.
Christmas tree, but like coral.
Yeah.
Yep. So again,
Very
those guys
cool.
will be out there for about 6 months, and they'll go from just being those little sticks to starting to put out their own little branches.
Mm-hmm.
And then we take them and we actually use either cement or epoxy
Ooh.
and put them on the reef.
Interesting.
And that just gives them, you know, we do it in like a few little points, and that gives them the ability to attach to the reef, but then they start growing right away. And then they lay out their own structure, their own skeleton starts to attach to the reef. And then they start to grow pretty quickly out into these bushes of staghorn coral. And like you were saying, yes, it costs $350 a coral to do this, but their value is almost infinite because, you know, you're not just taking, it's not like building a seawall where you're taking a rock and putting it out there, and then that rock just sits there. And that rock probably costs $350 to put out there
Right,
too.
yeah.
Instead, the coral keeps growing, and in a few years starts reproducing and making new corals. So if you think about, you know, over the lifespan of that coral, it's taken that $350 and just exponentially replicated it. And
Right.
Money tree.
yeah, it's
A
like
money tree.
Exactly.
But
I
it has
love
to
that.
make it. It has to make it first.
Yeah, you have to plant it, and planting that tree, planting that seed, takes a lot of work. So, but once it's there and once it's thriving, yeah, it'll make us all rich.
Rich somehow.
Yeah, somehow.
Yeah.
Rich in natural resources.
Rich and I love that.
Do you guys have maybe some questions you want Catherine to talk about a little bit? I know it's kind of hard to hear, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe ask Catherine if she can explain what she's doing with those pliers.
Yeah.
We were wondering if you could explain what you're doing with the pliers on the tree.
not bad of a delay.
Can I hear it?
Explain what you're doing with the wires on the tree. So we use something called monofilament to attach the corals to the trees because the corals grow really fast when they're suspended like this off the trees. So we use a fishing creep so we can attach them to our PVC or fiberglass coral trees.
Very cool.
So who you were listening to right there is Catherine Cobley. She's our Reef Response coordinator. So she's the one who helps us or takes the program and coordinates basically where we go out, when we go out, which corals are going out. And then the other person you heard from, Jason, he's our marine life restoration specialist. And so he really runs the sort of the logistics of the land-based coral nursery. He's our expert on plumbing, but also knows so much about the in-water nurseries as well. So that's why, you know, they're two of our lead technicians here with the most experience.
So you guys have met Jason a few times. He did the lionfish dissection at Brewers. I don't remember how long ago that was. Man, doing this every month,
so
time
fun.
is crazy.
Oh, yeah, you made ceviche.
Yes.
This is the last Science Saturday of the year, too.
Yeah,
my
and this
gosh.
is the last Science Saturday of the year. Yeah, so you guys have met Jason a few times. He actually did 2 Lionfish Science Saturdays. Also behind the scenes carrying stuff for me quite often. So shout out to Jason.
Yes.
We appreciate you.
All of my team are multitasking wonders, honestly.
Yeah.
Like,
Do you want to ask Jason to get some shots of each people on the team? Maybe we can introduce folks.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Radio to Jason.
What do I ask him?
Introduce,
Or show.
yeah, let's ask him to show each diver for a few seconds.
Can you show all the divers for a few seconds so we can introduce them and stuff?
All right, so we've got actually really not a bad delay. We're going
No.
great.
So who am I looking at? I think that's Brad. All right, so there's Brad. This is Brad. So Brad's a graduate of our master's program.
Brad is one of the technicians at EDI, and he helps us run some of our LCSC missions. So that means Brad helps plan where we put coral and how many we move out each day.
This is great footage.
Yeah, Brad also is a boat master, so he helps us with the boats. His boats are-
Some of our divers working on the vessel. So, right here, we have Rachel. She's another one of our technicians. And she helps us in our in-water nursery, but she also does a lot of really exciting work at our water tables. And so, when we say water tables, that means those are the corals that we grow at EDI. Because we have other nurseries besides those that are in water. And then moving over here, this is Nicholas. Nicholas is another one of our technicians, and he also helps us maintain our in-water nurseries. So he helps us make sure that the corals are healthy in our in-water nurseries. He also is really important for our science outreach. It helps us go out to the community and talk to people about the importance of coral reefs.
We say hi.
Nicholas is also a graduate of our undergraduate marine science program at UVI.
Yeah, so that's really important to mention that if you are thinking
Last but not
about
least, this is Dan. Dan helps us take really awesome pictures and videos so that we can share our work with people out in our community. So you can see he has his exciting camera setup. Behind the camera today, we have Jason. Jason makes sure we keep everything moving and the float through the boat. So he helps us with all of our field days. So when we move out corals and when we have to install new nursery trees.
She's not going to introduce herself.
and of course the diver talking is Catherine.
It's Catherine, right?
So I think that mentioning that Nick is an undergrad or graduate.
Well, he graduated from the undergraduate
He
program.
okay.
Right, yeah.
So for Virgin Islanders who are graduating high school or maybe not so happy with the university you chose because it's too cold. Speaking from experience, I went somewhere with winter and decided that that was not my speed. So I came home and I went to UVI. So there are really amazing programs and you can get involved with this work as an undergraduate.
Yep.
So you don't have to wait until you're in the graduate program, but I did get an email that you're accepting applications for the graduate program right now.
We sure are, yes. The Master of Marine and Environmental Science program is open for applications. They are due March 1st, so you can check out the website at mmes.uvi.edu. And yeah, so Catherine is also a graduate of our master's program. Brad, Dan, they are also graduates of our master's program. And then behind the camera today is Joe,
our favorite scientist, Joe.
Of our master's program, right.
Who's not putting his face in front of the camera today, apparently. Although he is wearing his Science Saturday shirt, but he is keeping us going in this wild endeavor, running Science Saturday off of 2 UVI research vessels. It's wild. Yeah, he's like jumping on the roof and doing all sorts of stuff. I think that everyth's running perfectly. He's just doing it for attention.
So this is a method we use here, right? Like, how commonly is this method as restoration used?
So that's a great question. So how commonly is this method used? It's used pretty much all over the Caribbean now, and also in some places in the Pacific. So the tree method was sort of pioneered in Florida. And replicated there. They've had a lot of coral decline earlier than the Virgin Islands has. So it's definitely a technique that's used everywhere, but we're still learning quite a lot about coral restoration techniques and what works and what doesn't work. So with the Reef Response program at UVI, we really have 3 prongs of activity. So we have the rescue section, which is taking the corals that may not otherwise have survived and putting them in the nurseries and tending to them and bringing them back and then putting them out onto the reef. And then we have the research section. So these are our 3 R's. So rescue and then research. So at the university, I'm a marine scientist. So honestly, like, science and research is what really drives me. So we do a lot of research trying to understand what are the best practices, what are the practices that will lead to the best success for restoration. At the university, we also have a new faculty member, Dr. Robin Smith, who's been working on looking at adaptive selection for corals. So using like genotypic methods, like lots of fancy science to try to like
serious science. I mean, everything you guys do is amazing, but like, man, talk about something I don't understand.
Right.
You guys are all amazing.
So come to our master's program and you'll understand.
It's too late for me.
You could do it.
But so come to UVI.
Yeah. So we have the, again, rescue, then research, and then restore. So that's kind of what we're doing today, which is we're rescuing these corals, but then ultimately some of these corals will be put out to restore the reefs. But there's a lot of science involved in that too. Like I was saying before, we don't just flip them off onto any reef that's out there. We do a lot about selection, and then we follow those corals through time to see who survives, who doesn't survive, who's growing best, who's maybe not growing so well, and try to figure out using standardized methods, like why are they succeeding or why are they failing? And then that informs the rescue arm again.
Right. And now, one of my favorite, I don't want to say favorite things to talk about in Science Saturday, but one thing that I insist upon talking about every Science Saturday is climate change. So I imagine we've got a lot of connections here, but you talk about seeing like the data behind who survives and which corals survive. Is that something that is changing with climate change?
It certainly is. So, the corals that the reefs that we're restoring these corals to are exposed to wildly different conditions than existed even 20 years ago.
Nice, perfect.
So,
Right up to some
there's some corals.
Nice.
So the reefs One of the major threats to corals is the warming of the oceans. So that causes the corals, that the coral animal has a very special relationship with a plant that lives inside its body. And those plants are what gives, those plants are photosynthesizing, taking the sun and creating sugars. And they're giving the corals the extra boost they need to grow skeletons. That ultimately build the reef. But as the temperatures warm, corals are actually pretty fussy when it comes to temperature.
You've mentioned this
They're so
9 or
fussy.
10 times.
I know. Can I say again? They're pretty fussy to deal with. So the corals, when they get too hot, they freak out. And when they do that, they actually get really mad at their plant roommates.
This is very similar to all of my camera equipment. When it gets too hot, it gets very upset.
It gets upset, and the corals start throwing their plant roommates out.
Ooh.
Or they start eating them. So digesting them, which is kind of weird also. But that's what causes coral bleaching. And so a lot of the reefs in the Virgin Islands and around the world have been exposed to coral bleaching or have experienced really bad coral bleaching in the past. Here in the Virgin Islands, we had a really bad event just in 2019. And when that happens, the coral can survive the kicking out of its plant roommates, but that makes it really stressed out. And so afterwards, it's much more susceptible to disease. And sometimes it goes so long without the plants, it dies. So it's kind of like a human having a really bad fever.
Right. And then also kicking out their roommate that does all the grocery shopping and cooking.
Then basically starving to death.
Ooh.
Yeah, nice.
Dark.
Yeah. We're going to a dark place, yeah.
Well, Mason, do you have any Sorry.
Oh.
Finish your thought.
No. Well, just that, so what we do at Reef Response is we try to select corals that have a really good relationship with their plant roommates. And that might mean hosting plant roommates who are stronger about not being kicked out, right? Like they put up a fight. So that takes a lot more energy, but we try to select for those corals that do better. But yeah.
Cool. So we're coming up close to our time. We're not shutting down yet, but we've been talking a while. Smush, do you have any more questions for our divers that you've thought of?
Maybe we could ask them how many trees are there and how many pieces of coral are on each tree.
Ooh, yeah. Good. Go for it.
We were wondering about how many trees there were and about how many pieces of coral are on each tree.
At this nursery at Great Seas Cave, we have 6 trees. And our trees are a combination of either 50 corals or 100 corals. So on each branch of the coral tree, we will have 10 pieces of coral. So how many coral pieces depends on how many branches are on each tree.
So 6 trees, I think she said,
Yeah.
and about 100 pieces of coral on
That's
each.
100.
We have another nursery at Flash which is really close to the airport. And up there we have 12 trees. So the trees here are a little short because this is such a shallow site. But at Flash our trees are twice the size of this. And so each of those trees holds 100 corals also.
How many feet tall are the trees that are at the other nurseries?
At the Black Nursery, those trees are 10 feet tall. So those are really cool to work with. It kind of feels like you're in a forest with those really tall redwood trees.
Wow, 10 feet.
That's really, really large trees. That's really cool.
So that's the deeper location that we have
Right.
the trees.
Yeah, that would not fit here.
No, they
10
don't fit.
feet tall here, they would just be right on the surface.
They'd be
Yeah.
running out of the water.
Yeah.
that would
That
not
would-
be good.
That probably wouldn't work. But that's really cool. Here's Dan. Hey, Dan.
I mean, we got time. Not pushing off. This is really cool.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So we
nice.
just have some really amazing footage right now. So, you know, we don't have a limit to Science Saturday.
But yeah, I mean, what else do we want to talk to the divers about? We got good connection.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
What
What's it
other-
like being underwater? I mean,
Yeah, what's
with
it-
the full face mask. I mean, for those of you
Yes.
who don't dive.
Yeah. So ask our divers what it's like working in full face masks.
What's it like working in a full face mask? Like, how does it feel? Just because I've only used normal face masks.
I feel a little bit like
Darth Vader.
sounds about breathing. But they're a lot of fun. So I definitely enjoy it. I like being able to tell jokes underwater and people will laugh at me or with me.
We like to tell jokes at Reef Response.
They do kind of sound like Darth Vader, but underwater. With bubbles.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is maybe one year we can do a Halloween Science Saturday with the full face masks. I don't know what we
A
would
night,
do.
Night dive?
Oh,
What?
Science Saturday
Dark.
night.
Yeah. I know, I am trying to
What
kill
if
Joe.
night diving, like
Uh-huh.
scuba gear, but like glow in the dark?
Ooh, yeah.
Skeleton.
Corals are pretty different at night.
Yeah,
They
corals are
are.
very different at night. I actually did a few night dives with like fluorescent lights and special like masks to see the fluorescence of the corals.
Yeah.
Although this is totally off topic, but hey, it's me. I was doing the dive near, it was actually at Koki, and Jason and I were going around with the special light, and we both saw the most vibrant, beautiful sliver of something in the sand, and we're like, what is it? And we swam over, and it was a zip tie.
Oh, man.
But it was the most beautiful zip tie I've ever seen in my life.
All right, well, it's very pretty
so,
underwater.
yeah.
Well, the reason the corals are different at night, like I was saying, the plant roommates during the day, the corals are all quiet because they want their plant roommates to get as much sun as possible. But at night, the plants basically go to sleep. And so the corals wake up and stick their polyps out. And then they start eating from the water column. They like to eat little floating zooplankton and little worms and things like that from the water. So one of the other important things about corals is they're also in a way filtering the water because they're eating some of the things that are floating in the water, like the
Right.
animals and plants in the water. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's super cool. What else do we have for our divers? What else do we want to know? What's their favorite coral?
What are your guys' favorite corals?
That's a good question, and that's kind of hard to answer. But I do like the species we're working with. It's called the Saghor coral, and the science name is a couple cervicornis. And this coral is super cool because it's really fast growing, which makes it really exciting to use for restoration. So it's really cool. At the places we go and plant this coral at, in about 6 months' time, it's really started to grow and look healthy. So it always makes us really happy when we go to our sites and this species is looking really healthy. Because it's cool, because we feel like we're making a difference.
If you go to our website.
What's your favorite coral?
Yeah, that's easy.
I don't know that many corals, but rain coral. That's the only one I can think of right now.
Corals.
Corals are cool.
My favorite coral
Yeah, that's
is
a good one.
my favorite brain coral is Eusmelia. How do you pronounce it?
Fastigiata.
Fastigiata.
Yeah.
But because it looks like a bouquet of flowers, and my friends will know I learned how to remember that name from a very good friend of mine, Leslie, who is on St. Croix, and she would say, "You smell you like a flower," and so every time I see one, I shout that out. But they really are beautiful, and they look like flower bouquets.
And I think they are called the flower cup coral.
Nice.
Is the common name. Big props to you for remembering that. Nice.
Ooh, you smell you like a
Yeah.
like a flower.
Leslie also is a graduate of our master's
That's
program.
true. Yeah,
We're
she
everywhere,
went through
everywhere.
the UVI program and then came to DPNR and worked with us for a while and is now at NOAA. So talk about a career path.
Yeah.
We should do just a career Science Saturday.
Should, yeah. We absolutely, you know, at UVI we have programs for high school students too. So we have the program Youth Ocean Explorers, which is actually administered by the Virgin Islands Marine Advisory Service, but there's a lot of help from UVI. And then we have the undergraduate marine science program with lots of internships, and then the graduate program too. But I was going to say Catherine's favorite coral and brain corals are featured on the Reef Response website. So if you want to keep up with us, it's reefresponse.org. You can find us there.
And so I can't help but notice that on your Santa hat, you guys have the beautiful Reef Response stickers with the logo. So if you want to learn more about Reef Response, you got yours too.
Yeah.
Smushes
It
doesn't
wasn't
really
quite
fit
staying
over
on.
the. That's okay. Love it. Yeah, so you can learn more. A beautiful PDF booklet just came out about the Livongo project. Props to Elisa who put that together. She's an amazing graphic designer. Yeah, so there's a lot of really amazing information. So beyond the work that they're doing in the water, the outreach and, you know, education, just the fact that they're here with us today doing Science Saturday. Not that I'm playing favorites, but I am my favorite. So we're here with me today on Science Saturday. So yeah, this is today on Science Saturday. Also, totally unrelated, I'm thinking about coming up with a theme song for Science Saturday. So,
Be important.
yeah. All right. So we are right up almost at an hour. So I think that it's time we should get some final thoughts from everybody. So Mason, can you ask our divers to leave us with one final thought or piece of advice today?
We're about to end off Science Saturday. Will you leave us off with like one final piece of like advice or something from today?
Hey, what is advice or question? Just to make sure I'm hearing okay.
She wants to know, was it advice?
What?
She wants to know
Advice. Yeah,
Is
one
it a-
piece of advice.
one piece of advice.
Yeah, just one piece of advice.
So, coral reefs are really important around the world, but they're also super important for our communities here in St. Thomas and in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So my advice, or what I would love for everyone to do, is to take the time to learn a little bit of why they're so important to our communities.
Awesome.
So for you guys, what do you think? We're going to do two questions. My first question is, what do you think the corals want for Christmas?
The corals want clean water.
Clean water.
Clean water.
Smush, what do you think the corals want for Christmas?
To not be dying.
To
all the
not be
time.
dying.
Yes.
I think that the corals want to not be knocked over by anchors.
Yes, that too. Yeah.
What do you want for Christmas?
I want some more funding for Reef Response.
I like that. What do you want for Christmas?
Soft sheets.
Soft sheets.
I want that too.
Yeah. All right. Funding for Reef Response. Soft, sustainably made sheets.
Bamboo.
Ooh, yeah. Bamboo is
And
a very
and
sustainable.
happy habitat for the corals.
And a happy habitat for the corals. All right, guys. This has been a phenomenal Science Saturday. I kind of don't want to cut us off, but I also, you know, kind of
talk
want to
about
go
corals all
swimming.
day.
I know.
Science Saturdays we have to have to try and fill the space because
Yeah.
we can't think of what to talk about. But this one we could just go on for like 4 hours.
I know. We could
I
talk
could talk
about
a lot.
we could talk a lot about coral. But I want to say thank you so much to everybody watching with me here today. The monumental effort to make this happen. I mean, I got to the dock at like 8:15, but
We've been there a lot earlier.
Yeah, they had been there since 7:30, I think.
7 for some people.
7 for some people. So this has been a day. This has been beautiful. Happy holidays, everybody. We are so excited to be wrapping up this year and our last Science Saturday of the year. And in March is going to be our 6-year anniversary for Science Saturday.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
March 11th. We actually had our first Science Saturday on March 11th, 2017.
Oh my gosh.
Before I knew that Science Saturday existed.
Yeah. And we've been virtual for what, 3 years now? I'm not sure what that anniversary is,
Let's
but
not talk about
yeah.
the virtual part.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're here now. So everybody, thank you so much. Have a beautiful day. Don't forget the corals for Christmas, and don't forget to look up Reef Response on the Facebook, Instagram, online, all of it.